Okay, we're recording.
Okay.
Start over. There you go. Sorry.
Okay, here we go. So it's Tool Time Tuesday, and today we're covering EndNote for beginners. Before we get started on EndNote, I do want to mention some upcoming classes. Tomorrow, actually, we have our EndNote Level Up session where we get into some advanced functionality of EndNote. So if you like what you see today, then please join us tomorrow for the Level Up session. We also have PubMed Level Up on the 24th, and then a little later in the month, writing and publishing scientific articles, deep dives, the first installment, and that is coming up on the 27th. I'm going to drop a link to the calendar because I think I happen to have that handy in the chat. That way you can take a look and register for anything that you think is interesting or you think might be useful to you in your work. Okay, I'll start with a very brief introduction of EndNote. EndNote is a reference management software package. It lets you import reference data into one central location. It lets you access your references either on your desktop or online if you register for an EndNote online account. And everyone's favorite part about EndNote, it lets you create citations and bibliographies for documents in auto fashion. I also should mention at this point that the institution recently made EndNote 20 available, but the library won't begin training for 20 until summer. From what I know about 20, the biggest difference is just the look of the interface between the two versions, so there shouldn't be a big learning curve as we transition. Everything that is covered in today's session, plus more, is published for you in our EndNote 19 guide. Step-by-step instructions for EndNote activities can be accessed using the menu on the left-hand side of the guide. I will also drop the link for the guide in the chat, but we'll be sure to share it out after the session as well. So let me grab that link for you. There you go. Okay, before we dive into the demonstration, and I am going to sort of toggle back and forth between the slides and a live demonstration of some of the activities for EndNote, but I want to mention some things that are important, a few best practices for best performance of EndNote. So new libraries, when you create them, that's the first thing that you do, and we're going to do that next with EndNote. When you create the new library, two parts are created to support the library, a .enl file and a .data folder. Both parts are required for the library to operate, so please do not delete either part. Oftentimes people will come across the data. I think they're just in a frenzy cleaning files out, and they'll delete the data folder, but you have to have both parts. Also, you never want to save libraries to cloud-based drives. This can lead to corruption. If you save libraries to a network drive, then you want to make sure that you back up to your local drive for safekeeping. Again, like EndNote at its core is a database, and being on a network drive can create some corruption issues. And also there's just human error in case you accidentally delete something. There are two options for you to back up. You can simply save a copy. I would recommend this if your EndNote library is relatively small. If it's a large library, meaning it's holding lots of references, then I would recommend that you use the compressed library option to back up your library. The compressed library option just reduces the size of the file and takes up less storage space. And then lastly, I would highly recommend, this is not required, but I highly recommend that you create an EndNote online account. The link is here in the slide, so you'll have access to that when we share things out after the session. You can also just Google though EndNote online, and you should see this address. You want to register for an account. It's not tied to your institutional affiliation. You can use your Anderson email address if you'd like, but it's not tied to us. This is just an account on the EndNote Online platform, a personal account. Your EndNote Online account can also serve as a backup for your library, but also it enables the sync and share features of EndNote. So you can't use those features unless you have the EndNote Online account. And this is also what allows you to be able to access your EndNote libraries from any device. So if you're away from the machine where the software is actually installed, you can still get to your library if you have the EndNote online account. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is create a new library, but a little bit about that first. You can create an unlimited number of libraries, but I really recommend limiting libraries. Unless you're working on multiple large projects, this can cut down on confusion for both the user and EndNote. A little later, I'll show you how to organize your references using what EndNote calls groups. And so I would recommend using groups as a way to separate and organize references in a single library. So I'm going to bring up my EndNote library, my note application, and what you see is my library. It's this smaller box inside this bigger box. This is my library, but I'm going to create a brand new library. So we're going to do that, and I'll try to move my, I have the how-to here for you, but let's go to File and New. And two things here. The default name is my EndNote library, but you can change that. I'm going to name, what's today's date? I'll name it today's date so I'll remember that this was a test library. But you want to pay attention to, again, where you're saving the EndNote library. You don't want to save it to OneDrive. You can save it to a network drive, but remember, if you save it to a network drive, then back up your libraries for safekeeping. So we're going to save that. And that library should pop open. And there we go. So we have a brand new library. The name of my library is located right up here in the top left of the library window. You can also customize the layout using the layout option in the bottom right of your library. It gives you a couple of different options. I'm not going to do that because I'm so used to this layout, and I might confuse myself if I change that. Now, I understand in EndNote 20 that they've taken this feature away and that you cannot customize the layout of your library. I don't know if anyone can confirm that if you're using 20, but that's what I've heard. So now we have a new EndNote library. Okay, so a couple of things for preferences for our EndNote library that we want to make sure that we give some attention to. Find full text libraries and the sync feature are the preferences that we are going to take a look at. Find full text, this makes locates the full text files associated with references in a library. And you can optimize this feature by adding a custom library link to connect EndNote with our subscription services. And this link is available on the EndNote guide, but again, I am going to drop this link in the chat for you. There we go. And I'll show you where that goes here in just a second. But the next preference that we're going to look at are the libraries. This tells EndNote to automatically open a library on startup. And then finally, sync. This is your online account. You're going to enter those credentials in the preferences to let the EndNote desktop application sync to the online counterpart. So let's go back to our EndNote library. We're going to go to Edit, and we're going to select Preferences. And this is where we have our preferences. Now, there's lots of preferences that you can work through and set for yourself and for whatever your user behavior is. But we're going to look at Find Full Text, which is here. So in this preference, you want to make sure that all of the boxes are ticked. And this field, Open URL Path, is where you're going to drop or paste that link. that I shared with you in the chat. But again, this link is also on the EndNote 19 guide. The other box that you want to make sure is ticked is this one at the bottom to automatically invoke find full text on newly imported references. So once you've done all of that, you're going to click apply. And we're going to move to the next preference. The next preference is libraries. So we're going to click libraries. And here's where you tell EndNote what you want it to do when you start EndNote. You can open a specific library, the most recent. You can have EndNote prompt you every single time you start up, tell it which library you want to open, or you can tell it to do nothing at all. I opt to choose to open a specific library. So you would make that selection and then again, just click apply. And then lastly, we're going to go to sync. And this is where you would come to enter those EndNote online credentials. So email address and the password. And I'm going to talk to you about sync give you a few more details on sync here in just a minute. So you would tick this box also sync automatically. Only one library can be synced to your EndNote online account. So you need to be careful about which library that is, because so you cannot delete this. You can change it, but it's difficult to do. There's a workaround where we have to sort of trick EndNote to change the library that's synced to our online account. So when we're done with, yes.
We have a question. Are these preferences the default?
No.
Okay.
They are not.
Thank you.
So we're done with our preferences and we're going to say okay. So we're good to go on preferences for now. So next up is, I would say, probably even more important than setting your preferences, and this is the journal term list. So EndNote uses term lists to enter information in fields accurately and consistently. And the journal term list is what makes journal names appear consistently in the bibliography, either in an abbreviated format or the complete name format. And so we get questions about this all the time. Why is EndNote formatting my journal name wrong? And it is likely tied to the journal term list. So we want to define the journal term list for EndNote. So to do that, we are going to go to Tools and Define Term Lists. And we have two tabs at the top, Lists and Terms. If you have already started using EndNote, then what has happened is it's automatically bringing in terms. So if you click on this Terms tab and you see terms, you're going to want to delete those before you import the new term list. So I have a brand new library and I haven't added anything to it yet, so there are no terms, right? So I'm going to go to Lists and I'm going to select Journals, and then I'm going to click on Import List. And it's going to take me here to select from a group of files. These files are automatically downloaded as part of the EndNote install. So you have these. This is part of that install of EndNote. And we want to look for the medical file. And here it is. So we'll double click there and we'll bring in those terms. So you can see 14,504 terms have been inserted into the journal's term list. And this medical file comes from PubMed. So we're going to say, okay, and we're going to close. We're done defining our journal term list. So let me pause. Are there any questions about the journal term list? I don't see anything. Okay. Okay, so moving right along, we get to
we do have a question. Do those
Okay.
term files get automatically updated, or do we need to re-upload them from time to time?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. That's something I'm going to have to check on. I have never had to re-import the medical term list. And you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, I imagine that since those files are part of the the software package, that when EndNote updates, because it, just like Zoom, it updates in these like increments, right? So you'll be running like 19.2, 19.3. I imagine with those automatic updates that are happening with the EndNote program, that's they're probably updating that file if there are any updates to be made, if that makes sense. But I will double check on that. Is there anything else? Okay. So now we're gonna add references. So we've established our library, we've set up our preferences, we've defined our term list, and so now the fun begins, and we get to add references to our EndNote library. References can be imported in a few different ways. I am only going to cover probably the most common ways that we get references into our library, which is direct export from a database like PubMed or from a file. Not PubMed, EndNote supports only a handful of file formats, including PDF, RIS, and tab delimited. So I'm going to show you, I'm not going to demonstrate the file import for you. It's pretty self-explanatory, and there are step-by-step instructions on the EndNote 19 guide on how to do this. I am going to demonstrate how to get references from PubMed into your EndNote library. So I'm going to share my browser. And so you should see PubMed here. And I've just done a very basic search on gut health. So I'm going to mark the article citations that I want to bring into my EndNote library. And I do that just by ticking the box next to the article citations title. And once I'm done selecting everything that I'd like to import, I'm going to click on Send To. This is where PubMed keeps its direct export feature, and it is under Citation Manager. So I'm going to click Citation Manager. That is what EndNote is. And it does give me the option here. Do I want to bring in the 5 citations that I've just ticked off, or all results on the page, or all results from the search? I'm going to recommend that you never bring in all results from a search, unless you're working on something, I don't know, like a systematic review. Because like in this case, we have 44,000 results. EndNote can support that many references, but that's a lot of information to bring in. So I'm going to stick with the default, which is the 5 that I've ticked off, and I'm going to tell PubMed to create a file. It's going to create a special file for me, download at the bottom of my page. When I open this file up, it's automatically going to start talking with EndNote. You can see it brings my EndNote library up, and it's going to auto import those references into EndNote. Now, if this is the first time that you're doing this, you may be prompted to choose an application to open the file. So you want to make sure that you choose EndNote. And then once you do that one time, it shouldn't prompt you. It should just remember to always use EndNote to open that specific file type. And so here are my references from PubMed. They automatically go into 2 groups, all references and imported references. And they'll stay here in the imported references group until I import a new batch of references. But next up, I'm going to show you how you can organize these references. Okay. So EndNote lets you organize references into groups, which are really just folders. They just call them groups. There are 3 types of groups. The most commonly used, though, are group set and group. There's something called a smart group, but that's more advanced, and I do cover that in the EndNote Level Up course. So the EndNote uses a hierarchy for groups. So group sets sit at the top of the hierarchy, and a group nests under that. And I'll show you what that looks like. So it'll make a little more sense. Oop, there you are. Okay. So I have some default groups. You can see here this is my groups pane on the left-hand side. But to create a new group, I can go up to groups, and I am going to start by creating a group set. Okay, so there's my group set. Now I can create groups to nest under this. So if I right click there, then I can create a group, and I'm going to call this, oop, I'm going to create another group. And now I can bring the references that I imported into these groups. And I can do that just by dragging and dropping. So I can select multiple by holding down my control button. I can bring these into my test A group, and then I can bring these into my test B group. And that's how I can organize my references. So super easy to create and populate groups. Are there any questions about groups?
None in the
Okay.
chat at the moment.
Okay. So let's move on because we're getting close here. Okay, so finally, this is everybody's favorite part about EndNote, and that is the Microsoft Word plugin. EndNote uses this plugin. It's known as Cite While You Write to work with Microsoft Word or whatever word processing program you're using during the writing process. So this is what lets you insert those in-text citations and auto creates references for those citations. The plugin, kind of just like those termless files, are part of the EndNote install. So it automatically attaches an EndNote tab, which you see in the screenshot here, to your word processing program. And so I'm going to bring up a Word document, and let me make that bigger so you can see better. So here's a document where I'm using EndNote. So you can see there is an EndNote 19 tab, now part of my Word ribbon. And under this tab are the commands for using EndNote. So I can write and cite something. So let's say I need to back that up. I'm going to cite something. So I'm going to go to Insert Citation. And that's going to bring up an EndNote window. I'll bring that over for you so you can see. And I am going to search for let me see. Let me see. I'll search. You can search by keyword. You can search by title. You can search by author, just to bring up and I'm going to say insert. And you can see, I know that that's hard to see there because I'm using AMA, which uses a superscript number system. But there's my in-text citation, and it happens really fast. But if you notice also here for that citation, a reference was created and auto formatted to match JAMA's output style, their professional writing style. And I'll do that. Let's see. We can insert another citation. We'll see. And you can see I can just keep citing and writing, and it will continue to create these formatted citations and references for me. Now, important to note here that if you make a mistake or you need to edit something, you never want to use your backspace or your delete buttons in your Word document. This can corrupt the document because there's coding that's happening behind the scenes, which you can't see. But that coding is what is formatting everything for you. So you want to use the edit and manage citations command to remove references from your document. So you would select the reference, and then there's an option to remove in this drop-down menu. So you would remove citation and then say, okay. That's what you would want to do instead of using backspace or delete. And that's, yes.
We have a question in the chat. Two questions. Is the resulting formatting of the citation standardized, e.g. capitalization of journal names?
Yes, according to whatever style you have set. And you can move between styles. EndNote has, I think they're up to like 8,000 output styles. So yes, and they're formatting according to whatever the rules are of whatever the style you have selected. So for AMA, um, you know, they're italicizing and using the abbreviation for the journal name because that's what AMA style calls for. I hope that answered the question.
The other question we have is, how do I import EndNote X9 to my Word ribbon? So I'm assuming that means add, really.
So if it didn't happen automatically as part of the install, there are ways to get it added. There are instructions um, in the EndNote guide. There's actually an FAQ that takes you through the steps where you can install the EndNote 19 tab. I will make sure, I'll go back and double check the guide, and I'll make sure that those instructions are apparent on the guide.
New question for you. Do we cite ChatGPT, Bard, etc. as though software or a database or some other way?
Do you cite ChatGPT?
Yeah, or Bard, etc. as though software or a database or some other way?
I think you need to probably refer to, I think we're still, learning how to work with these tools. And I think that you need to probably refer to the style guide. I know AMA, for example, does now have something out specifically in their manual about how you handle citing chat GP or AI, any of those types of tools. Um, so I would refer to whatever style you're using for instruction on how to handle that. Are there any other questions?
There's not another question, but Erica says the capitalization of journal titles is not actually consistent in the current version of EndNote. EndNote is pulling that from the journals, some of which use sentence case and some of which use headline case for journal article titles.
Okay, that is good to know. Thank you, Erica.
This is Jessica Swan. I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify with my question, similar to what Erica's mentioning. When I'm editing someone's manuscript, I'll see inconsistencies in the reference list. And even though they're using EndNote, and that's why I wondered, because I assume that they're doing a style, but it seemed odd to me that in an automated produced list that there were inconsistencies, and I wondered how that was happening.
I think there are a couple of different ways that can happen. The first thing that comes to mind for me is that if they're adding any references manually to EndNote, which you absolutely can do, or even if they are editing a reference that they bring in by automatic import, if they open that up and edit that reference, then that could create some of that inconsistency in the formatting. So that's one way that might be happening. Also, EndNote does have something called EndNote Capture, which is a browser tool, which will let you bring in references from web pages, like it tries to extract bibliographic data from web pages, but that tool is if I'm being totally honest, it's pretty lousy. And it brings in bad data and it places data in the wrong fields. So unless the user edits those captures, then that could be another explanation for some of that inconsistency in formatting. I am told, though, that in EndNote 20, there's an updated version of this capture tool, which performs much better, but I don't know for sure yet. So I Oops, there we go. Okay, so unless there are any other questions, I'm happy to stay on. It is 10:30, so I will stay on. I'm going to answer any questions for a few more minutes. But I also wanted to mention before you go that I did include, I'm not going to go over this, but I did include in the slide, so you will get these information about sharing a library and collaborative writing, because we get a ton of questions about these two things. So I wanted to make sure that I touched on that for you. So you'll have this information in the slides after the session. So I will hang out for a little bit and answer any questions, but I hope everybody has a great rest of your week. And thank you so much for joining us.
All right, I'll stop the recording.